Hello, welcome to this lecture on the nervous tissue. And today we're going to divide the class in four different sections. In the first section, we're going to talk about the neuron classification, the different terminology that I'm sure that you know. You know what is a dendrite, what is an axon, what are all these different terminology that is basic that I'm sure that you know, but I want that in the beginning it's clear. So we have an introduction talking about all those things so we can move into the next topic. Then we're going to move into the different type of neurons and we're going to focus on three. So here, the summary is here. Do you see this person is getting burned? Yeah, and what is happening is that he will have an impulse that travel to the spinal cord and then it will travel the signal that say move because you're getting burned. Yeah, to produce that movement, you need to have three neurons. One that is the sensory neuron that is here. Then you need an interneuron. Yeah, so here is the interneuron that goes travel, and then at the end you need this motor neuron. Motor neuron that is the one that produces or effector neuron that is the one that say to the hand you need to move from there. Okay, and this, remember, this doesn't happen in an hour, it happened in less than a second. Okay, so we're going to talk about the terminology, then we're going to talk about the different type of neurons, and later we're going to talk about something that you have heard a lot, that is synapses. Yeah, and we're going to talk about two types, electrical and chemical synapses. And we're going to talk about how, if you remember, all these channels that we have here, these gap junctions, are very important, and also how we have here these vesicles that go and release calcium. Yeah, so we'll have different cellular machinery to perform these electrical and chemical synapses. And right now, I don't want to give you more information, just that you know there are two types, and those types differ in the mechanisms at the cellular level. Then we're going to talk about different type of neurotransmitters, so that there are some that are inhibitory, or ones that are excitatory, and I'm going to give you several examples. Okay, so let's start with the first. So let's focus on the basic terminology, and to that I'm going to show you your textbook. So here again I have a diagram that I found in this link of your book. Please go there. This could be one of the questions of the quiz. It can help you a lot to study what are the cranial nerves, what are the spinal nerves, what is the brain, what is the spinal cord, and then if you go into one of those, it can go in detail showing you like, okay, what are the main section of here, and it is very helpful to study in that way. So please go on and look into that. So now let's talk about the layout of the nervous system, and we can divide it into two main sections. The first section is here in orange, that is the central nervous system, and is contains, let's put 1.1 the brain, and here 1.2 the spinal cord. So here, of course, you know where is the brain, and of course the spinal cord, you know that is here. Now let's talk about the second one, that is this peripheral nervous system that is formed by the cranial nerves. So let's put 2.1, here the spinal nerves, 2.2, and here you can see all the cranial nerves, and here you can see all the spinal nerves around this area. Okay, and they also go to different sections. So just to show you that, now I'm going to show you another schematic that I found that it was simpler, that it helped me to understand this topic easier, in an easier way. Okay, so far we talked that the nervous system has two main components. The first one is the central nervous system, and do you remember the two main components? So there were two. First one was the brain. Yeah, the second was the spinal cord. Easy, brain here, spinal cord again here. And in blue, you can see the peripheral nervous system, that it composed, okay, that is abbreviated peripheral. Yeah, the P is from peripheral nervous system, and the C here is the central nervous system. So this one is composed of sensory and motor components. Yeah, so as you remember, the sensory neurons and the motor neurons, you remember, are the one that perceive, and the motor are the one that give the response. Okay, so this is from a big picture, the big division: central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Okay, this is an exercise that is pretty easy. I want that you tell me the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system is composed of two things, yeah, and the peripheral nervous system is composed of two things. Now I want to tell you also what type of neurons they contain, yeah, the central one and the peripheral. And here you have a pretty easy clue that can help you a little bit, but I think it's pretty easy. You can see how the signals travel, yeah. So if you want, you can stop the video. If not, I will give you the answer right away. So the central nervous system is composed of, number one, the brain. That is super easy. Number two, spinal cord. You know that is here. It doesn't contain the neurons that are sensing or the neurons that are producing the effect. Yeah. So it contains the interneurons. Yeah, the ones that are, yeah, if you remember the first figure of the class in the first slide. Now we're going to talk about the peripheral nervous system, and so we already talked about this one: brain, spinal cord. So the only option are nerves, and we have talked about two type of nerves: one that attach to the brain, and another one that attach to the spinal nerves, yeah, to the spinal cord. And here is where you have the other two type of neurons. If you remember, we had sensory neurons and motor neurons. And if you have doubts about this, about the type of neurons, don't worry. This is the second section of the class. Now that you know this very basic view, now we're going to talk about the histology of the nervous system. So we're going to go through some of the most important cells. Here you can see a neuron taken from your textbook. Later I will show you a schematic that will make your life much easier. But the most important part that I want to tell you, that I want that you remember, is that, of course, the nervous system have neurons, and I told you that there are three types, and later we will show you more subdivisions. However, there are at least two major type of cells. Yeah, of course, neurons are very important, and they are the functional cells, but they are excitable electrically, so they will be sending signals based on changing ions along the membrane, and they will help to send those signals, but they are not the only type of neuron. There is a second major type. There is the neuroglia that support the neurons and protect the neurons. Okay, so two different types. One that are the neurons, that are the ones that send the signal, and the other ones that are the ones that protect the neurons, and then the ones that are in charge of supporting the neuron, that don't allow that the signals disappear. And I will get into that into the following slide. Now, in the next slide, I'm just going to show you an schematic of a neuron, and I just want that you remember, try to answer basic terminology if you know all the components. Here, you just have to fill the blanks. Yeah, if you want, you can stop the video. If not, you can continue here in the following slides. I will tell you each one of the parts. So the first thing that I want that you notice is that possibly, if you remember, our cells have different shapes. Some are there, like oval-like, or one have geometrical shapes, you know, and some of them look like hexagons. Let's suppose that this is a pretty hexagon, but this one look like two trees, you know, on like the branches of a tree in one side and the branches of a tree in another side. And why do you think that happened? So let's remember other type of cells. So if you remember, in your gut you have cells that have all this microvilli, and if you remember why you have in your gut, in your intestine, this microvilli, because you increase the surface tension for absorption. Yeah, here you are also increasing the surface tension in this area. Yeah, by doing that, so you will be able to receive more signals and you will be able to send more signals. So remember that this region are called dendrites, that look like branchings of a tree, and if you want to compare it to your body, this will be like the ear. So let's suppose that I paint there an ear. Why? Because they are receiving a signal. On the other hand, here in this region is called axon terminal, and if you were comparing to your body, this will be the mouth, because let's put mouth, because this one is sending a signal. Okay, so far we have divided into dendrite and the axon terminal, but there are more things there. So if you see here in green, you have a structure there, pretty easy. This is still a cell. All these highly specialized and look different from other cells. Yeah, here this is the nucleus, and surrounding the nucleus, all this region that you have here, you will have organelles and a cytoplasm. This is called cell body and or soma. So now that I told you this, I want you to think about the middle part, the yellow region. Why do you think that there is a yellow region in that area? Yeah, so we have the dendrites that are receiving a signal, and the final part that is like the mouth that is sending a signal, yeah, communicating to another neuron. Okay, so here, if you remember, if you see this, here the signal has to travel really fast, and to do that, you have to insulate it. And how you insulate it? You have cable, like in the same way that you have your laptop with a cable that have an insulation that is a plastic. Here you have a lipid that is creating those insulation, and you need to have a special cells that produce that insulation. And to have these spaces in purple, it will allow that to conduct the signal and that it goes faster. Okay, so if these spaces didn't exist, the signal will go slower. Now that they have that space, it will speed up the signals, and there I will tell you later that you have special channels too. So remember, you have two regions that look like branches, and here you have one very long region that looks like a tunnel where all the ions travel. The axon goes from here up to here, this specific area of the end. This one is called the axon terminal. However, all this area, yeah, is called axon. In addition to that, you have this node of Ranvier, very important that they exist because they allow to speed up the signal. And so far, this is enough. Right now, for the introduction, later we will talk more about that. In addition to that, you have these myelin structures that are lipids that are insulating the signal, so you don't lose the signal. In addition, lastly, we have these Schwann cells, yeah, other type of glia cells or neuroglia that are in charge of supporting the neurons. Yeah, in this case, they are creating this lipid signal, so they allow the electrical signal to go from one region of the neuron up to the other region of the neuron. Okay, so hopefully that was clear. If you have a doubt, let me know in class or send me an email. Okay, so I hope that now you can feel this. Yeah, you know all these different components that are very easy, but now that you know them and you know, more important, why the cell is so specialized, these neurons are so specialized and have all these shapes. And again, they not only have neurons, they have other type of cells that are supporting the work of the neurons. Now I'm going to show you a video that can summarize all the information that I told you so far.
Brain comes under a system called nervous system. Structurally, nervous system is classified into two types: central nervous system, CNS, and peripheral nervous system, PNS. The central nervous system comprises of the brain and spinal cord. The spinal cord is the bridge that connects the brain to peripheral nervous system. It starts from medulla oblongata and stretches to lumbar region of the spine or vertebral column. The peripheral nervous system is a network of nerves spread across our body. Think of peripheral nervous system as a network of highway that connects the body with central nervous system. This highway has two-way traffic. Let's see how. When you hold a hot cup of coffee, sensory neurons in your hand transmit signal to brain through sensory neurons, also called afferent neurons, that the cup is hot. Your brain processes that information and send response through motor neurons, known as efferent neurons, that you must put that cup back. PNS consists of total 43 pairs of nerve, among which 12 originate in brain, named as cranial nerves, and 31 originate from spinal cord, hence called as spinal nerves. Here you hear the word neuron. Neuron is the basic unit of nervous system. It is the nerve cell which transmit electrical signals to brain. A neuron has three parts: dendrites, soma or cell body, and axon. Dendrites serve as input device for neuron because it receives input from other nerve cells. Soma or cell body of neuron contains nucleus. Axons serve as output device from where it transmits electrical response to other neurons.
So now we can go faster in the schematic of your textbook that have much more terminology. So here you see all these arrows. You remember all these arrows. So here are all the signals that the dendrites are receiving. That they have, if you remember, they have a branch, a tree branch morphology to increase the surface area. And the main function is receiving the electrical charge, electrical messages. This is why I showed you that are like the ears that are receiving signals. Then I also told you there was another structure, and you can find it here: cell body. Your textbook, they can also use the term soma or pericardium. Pretty easy. Peri, surrounding. And what is surrounding? The carrion. The carrion, if you remember, eukaryon, prokaryon, yeah? The carrion means nucleus. So pericardium is that surrounds the nucleus. And what surrounds the nucleus? All the cytoplasm or cell body or soma. Okay, so in that section, the most, at least in this diagram, is very important to remember. The nucleus is there, very large structure, but it's not the only structure. There is a lot of more specialization there. We're going to tell you some of those that appear in your textbook. Highly recommended that you go and look into that. So for example, these bodies that are not more than these, that are aggregates of free polyribosomes and raw endoplasmatic reticulum. In our word, these, if you remember, the function of those structures is to have a lot of translation. Yeah, so you have a lot of translation there that is needed to transmit the signal. Okay, so these are some of the structures. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the structures that are described in your book. Okay, so we are talking about the cell body. We already talked about the nucleus. We already talked about this association between the rough endoplasmatic reticulum and the polyribosomes. And now we're going to talk about this. In blue, you see the neurofibers. So you see them here, going to the axon. There are these threads that you can not only find it in the axon, you also find it in each one of going from one dendrite to another one, and they are very important to transmit the signal and are also important to keep the shape of the neuron. So in other words, this is a specialized cytoskeleton of the neuron. So to some degree, these neurofibrils remind the functions of the microtubules. And I told you they are delicate intercalating threads. So this is why I made all these little lines everywhere. And I'm going to talk about two: neurofilaments and neurotubules. Okay, in the next slide, I'm going to show you the functions. And I also show you that they are located in the cytoplasm, these tiny lines, and they extend from one dendrite into another one or into the axon. So here we have a schematic that I like it because it helps us understand the function. So here you have the neuron that we have been talking. You have another glia cell, remember, that are supporting the job of the neurons. And here, if you see, they are zooming in these structures that you can find in the axons and the dendrites. So here you see all these cytoskeleton, and a specialized cytoskeleton, the neurotube, neurofilaments. And in this particular case, you also find, of course, the insulator layer of myelin. But okay, so the neurofilaments are just bundles of a lot of neurofilaments will form these neurofibrils, and they will play an important role transmitted the signal. So you have all these neurofilaments that they will accumulate, and they will be sending, they will be important for the signal. The neurotubules, on the other hand, they are important to maintain the proper shape of the neuron. That is also very important. So I told you two things. You have neurofibrils, and I told you that those ones, yeah, neurofibrils are just bundles of neurofilaments that they are important, that play an important role in the transmission of impulses, while the neurotubules, they mainly form, they are very important in the proper shape of the neuron. So we already talked about the dendrites, yeah, and we already talked about this part of the cell body or soma. Now we're going to move to this region that is the axon, and if you see, the electrical signal has to go all over, yeah, all the way up to here. And we're going to zoom in into two specific regions of the axon. One that is close to the cell body, yeah, one that is here, and the other one that it will be here. Yeah, so one that is here, and the other one that it will be here. Yeah, so the two extremes of the neuron. And why? Because in that regions you will find the axon hillock. The axon hillock is the region where, if you remember, all the all the different dendrites are going to communicate all these ions, and they're going to start initiating the action potential. So the axon hillock is the place where all of them combine and trigger the action potential. The other section that is important is here. That is at the end of the neurons, where again all the ions, they need to again, the signal has to separate to be communicated again to dendrites, and to be more efficient, the branching is the best technique, is the best structure. And at the bottom of each one of the axon terminals, you will find these synaptic bulbs. Yeah, and those one are the locations where you find the neurotransmitter. So the action potential is going to affect and we will talk more later in different ways. And one of them, for example, is the release of neurotransmitters. Okay, so what I just told you is that the axons are very important, and in particular, I talk about the axon hillock, that is the initial region where is triggered the action potential. I also told you that at the end of the axons, you find these structures that are called axon terminals, that you can see it here, are all these branches that you find at the end of the axon. And at the end of each one of these axon terminals, you will find the synaptic end bulbs. That are the places where you can find the neurotransmitters. So now we're going to talk about the associated structures. We already did it. And here I'm just going to show you those in this schematic. So here you see the Schwann cell. So here you see the nucleus of the Schwann cell. And if you remember, the Schwann cell generate this layer of lipids here that are from using myelin. And finally, the other structure, you find it here, that you will find this insulation formed by lipids, yeah, and that is the node of Rambier. Okay, so I told you that the Schwann cells are important, that they create these myelin coverings that are different layers that insulate the axon, and I also show you that to speed up the process of transmitting the signal, there is these naked areas of myelin, yeah, that there are gaps that are called nodes of Rambier. Remember the direction of the impulse shown here by the signals, yeah, all these arrows. Now I'm going to ask this question. I want that you try to answer it. You can do it by just stopping the video, or if you want, you can wait for me to answer it. So if you already know the answer, if you want to think it alone, just stop the video. If you want that I explain it to you, continue watching this video. So here they're asking you that you compare to a biological example, a neuron, and compare with an electrical wire. Both, they transmit a signal, they transfer electricity. And they are telling you in neurons, you have myelin, yeah? So that's around the axon. What is the correspondent in the electrical wire? Yeah, so the myelin is you think that the myelin has a conductive property? Yeah, so the myelin will be like the conductive copper wire. On the other hand, it could be the opposite, that it is similar to the plastic insulating of the coating. It could be similar to the solder, or none of these options. And the answer is pretty easy. So here you have the jacket, and here you have the insulation. So the conductive area will be actually the part inside that allow to transfer the electrical. So this is not the function that the myelin has. The lipids actually are doing the opposite, are like the plastic insulating and helping that the electrical signal doesn't get lost. Okay, why ask you that question? Because I wanted that you remember that neurons are electrically excitable cells, and we have talked about two other type of tissues that are excitable. If you remember a few weeks ago, I showed you a picture of a frog that if you, with electricity, with an electrode, you remember that he moved his leg when you excite the muscle. So it's neurons, muscle, and the third one will be epithelium. Okay, and in the case of neurons, this idea of the conductor, that is the flow of charge, is very important, and the flow of charge will be done by the axon, and the node of Rambier will be important, while the insulator, yeah, will be the myelin is responsible for that, and we're going to talk about that. So just remember, neurons are electrically excitable cells, and here they communicate through a specialized connection that we're going to show two types that are the synapses. Okay, so that is something that you need to write down. I know many of you know that, but that we will talk about the next section of this lecture. And I told you that there is a section that is a conductor that is in charge of the flow of the charge, while there is another one that is the electrical insulator, yeah, that don't allow that the electrons flow freely in any direction. They have to move in a particular direction. Okay, so those components are important. Now I'm going to start talking again about myelin, but in context of the neurons. The majority of the neurons both the central or the peripheral nervous system have this insulation. However, the insulation is produced by different cells. So far I have been talking about the Schwann cells. However, in the central nervous system, you remember brain and spinal cord, it is produced by another glia cell. Yeah, it's called oligodendroglia cell. And in the peripheral nervous system, yeah, it's produced by the Schwann cells. Okay, so let me show you some schematic of those two cells. So as I said before, I have been mainly showing you pictures of the Schwann cells, that it will be cells of the peripheral nervous system. However, when we go to the central nervous system, we have a different type of cell. And if you see this mechanisms that they use to create this insulation, yeah, the oligodendrocytes is very different from the Schwann cells. Okay, so we just talked about the oligodendrocytes and the Schwann cells. So to finish this section of the class, let's talk about other type of neuroglia because there are many more. So to finish the introduction, I want that you remember that neuroglia can be located in both the central nervous system and in the peripheral nervous system. So here you will find four examples, and in the peripheral nervous system you will find two examples that we will talk in this class. And the primary function is to support and protect the neurons, and they represent 50% of the volume of the nervous system. And remember, if they get damaged, they have the ability to go through mitosis. That in some in the nervous system, neurons, depending on the location, they have a lower capacity to go through mitosis, or they do it much slower. So remember, in the case of the neuroglia, they can be called cell glia or glia cell, glia, neuroglia, and it refers to all the different type of cells that are involved in the following function, that is support and protect neurons. And as I said before, they represent almost 50% of the volume of the nervous system, and they are capable of mitosis if they get damaged. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some more pictures and some of the functions. So here there are more pictures of these glia cells, and I already talked about these two. And now let's talk about the microglia. And this one is a very important type of cells because it's involved in fighting the infections and removing the debris. In other words, it's in charge of the immune response. The other one that is here is the ependymal and the astrocytes. In the case of the astrocytes, are the one that produce this B, B, B that are that form the blood-brain barriers. In other words, they don't allow that the blood get in contact to the central nervous system. In this case, to the, for example, the brain. So they don't allow, as there is no contact, there is less chances that there are infections that go into the brain or tumors that go into the brain. The ependymal cells, as you can see here, they are ciliated cells that form an epithelial barrier that it can be located in the vein ventricular system and as well as the spinal cord in the central canal. So just to remind you, remember microglia fight infections, astrocytes, they form these blood barriers, and the ependymal cells are ciliated cells that also form these epithelial barriers, and they can be found in these two regions. In the next section, I'm going to show you a table that summarizes all the functions of not only this one, but two additional glia cells. So we are almost done with this section of the class. I just want to give you this table in case that you want to summarize everything. So remember, there are different types of glia cell, And here you find 4 types that are located in the central nervous system, and you find only 2 types that are located in the peripheral nervous system. Here you can find the 4 types of the one located in the central nervous system that we talked in the previous slide. And here you can find one that is found uh, in the peripheral nervous system that we already talked about it. And the only one that we didn't talk yet is these satellite cells that are in charge of supporting the neural cell body. So, while the other ones, for example, that you find here in yellow, they were in charge of insulating the axon. Here, this one is in the cell body in the peripheral nervous system in the ganglia. Okay, hopefully this table can help you to study. Okay, if you want, you can stop the video here and go to the next one, or you can try to practice all the cells that we study here in this chapter, and then I will give you the answers if you want. So here, let's start telling you that this diagram is shown in this structure, in this membrane called pia mater, and this is the innermost membrane enveloping the brain and the spinal cord. And this is why you see all these type of glia cells as well as neuron there. So let's start with the first one. In the first one, you see these 2 yellow cell bodies. Yeah, these are clearly neurons. Yeah, so this one are neurons. In number 2, you see this very particular cell that is creating this myelin that is surrounding the neuron, so but it's not attached to the cell. This seems to be not from the peripheral nervous system. This seems to be from the central nervous system. And as I said, this is the pia mater, that is the spinal cord or the brain. So here, those cells are not the Schwann cells. These are going to be the oligodendrocytes. Now, the third thing that you can see here is is not such a small yellow region, so it's not a node of Rambier. This will be just the axon, yeah. And in the fourth one, you will see the myelin, yeah, the myelin covering. Here you can see this very small yellow region, yeah, similar to this one. Yeah, so those one will be the nodes of Rambier. So you remember they speed up the signal. Here you see one difficult one. Yeah, you will not know this one, but this is in charge of create barriers, the BBB. Remember the blood uh, barriers, blood-brain barriers. So this will be the astrocytes. Now let's go to the number 7. In number 7, again, is this cell that is creating these myelin covers. So we already know that this will be the oligodendrocytes. Number 8, it will be this one that is a green one. They don't give us much information. Yeah, but I tell you, this one is in charge of fighting infections. Yeah, it's in charge of the immune response here. So you already know it is the microglia cells. 9 is a yellow cell body of a neuron. Number 10 is in charge of bringing, these cells are alive, so they need to have food, nutrients. So these will be the blood vessels that bring those things, the blood capillary. In 11, you have all these cells that are in blue that we just talked before, that they create barriers. Yeah, the BBBs. So here you will find all these astrocytes. And finally, 12, we already talked about that are in charge of preventing infections, so it will be the microglia. And 13 is this line of epithelial cells that have microvilli. So look here, that have all these ciliated and microvilli here that are forming also a barrier lining close to the spinal cord and the brain. So these will be the ependymal cells, and finally here they're just pointing out these microvilli and cilia. Okay, I hope that a lot of things now are much more clear. Please go and give a look to your textbook if you haven't done it. And if you have any question, let me know.